Welcome to Ouch. Was that a ghost? This podcast may contain graphic material, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Help me.
Now that we covered that, here's your host, Liz.
Welcome back to Ouch, Was That a Ghost? Today I am covering The Bell Witch. The story begins with a 32-year-old John Bell who was born in 1750. He married Lucy, a 12-year-old girl. Puke. The couple lived on a farm in North Carolina. In 1804 or 1805, the family traveled to the north section of what is known now as the Adams, Tennessee, along the Red River, to a huge 320-acre farm. On Wikipedia, it lists 6 children that the couple had. In a documentary, it listed 9. In an article, it listed 8. Either way, the longer list I have is Jessie, Elizabeth, who they also call Betsy. She's the main focus of the story. Richard, John Jr., Drury, Benjamin, Esther, Joel, and Zadok. So those were the children, or some of them were. So John Bell was said to be possibly a tobacco farmer. That's what his grandson wrote in his book. But I also saw corn, so maybe both. But I know that this was a big place for cotton too, so I don't know. John Bell's wealth was made on the back of enslaved people that he kept on the farm working. John Bell was a very religious man, and as soon as he moved to Tennessee, he joined a Baptist church, quickly becoming an elder in the church. 11 years after the Bell family settled in Tennessee, it was now 1817, John Bell was out in the cornfield when he spotted a black dog-looking creature with the head of a rabbit. John Bell shot several times at the animal until it just vanished. The incident was soon forgotten until later in the evening they were just having dinner, then they finished, and they started hearing a beating sound, like a banging, on the log exterior of the house. The family went outside to find the source of the pounding, but nobody was there, or no entity that they could see was there. Enslaved people around the farm started reporting hearing strange sounds, seeing strange animals. One enslaved man named Dean reported seeing a black dog-looking creature with the head of a rabbit and piercing red eyes. Others reported being tripped, beaten, or locked out of doors, with no one around to do this, or no entity that they could see around to do this. Others reported large flickering orbs that would move towards the house and just hover over the farm. It wasn't just the enslaved people that reported strange things around the farm. The family started hearing knocking, chains dragging, rats gnawing on the bedpost, and started hearing disembodied gulping and choking sounds. Betsy Bell seemed to be the one that got the brunt of this. She would get slapped or get her hair pulled by an unseen entity. Marks were now being left on the young girl's body, so John Bell enlisted the help of his closest friend, James Johnson. Not fully believing the Bells, James Johnson and his wife agreed to spend the night to appease his friend. During the night, Mr. Johnson was slapped and his blankets were ripped away. The next morning, Mr. Johnson described the entity as an evil spirit, the kind that the Bible talks about. They started hearing a disembodied voice of a woman, and over time it got clearer and louder. And one day, it said that she even quoted, verbatim, 2 sermons that were being preached 13 miles apart on the same day at the same time, which I'm not quite sure how that was verified, but okay, which solidified the family's belief that this was something not of this world. John Bell immediately thought that it was a witch that was targeting the family. He asked the church for assistance, not sure how they helped him, but it was stated that through some sort of communication, they were able to converse with the entity that identified herself as Kate. Kate, coincidentally, was the name of one of the Bell's neighbors, Catherine Batts, who went by Kate. The only thing that I've seen about Catherine Batts is that John Bell and an elder male of her family had some type of dispute in the past. When the entity was asked what it wanted, it replies that it just wanted to kill John Bell. The witch seemed to only like Lucy, John Bell's wife. Although John Bell was the witch's target, poor Betsy seemed to be the witch's focus. Betsy would be hit, stuck with unseen pins, and have her hair tied to the bedpost while she was sleeping. One night, hoping to allow Betsy a break, the family sent Betsy to a neighboring family's house for the night. Betsy fell asleep peacefully, until suddenly the sound of doors whipping open and raging winds were heard throughout the house. But when the family lit their candles and went to go investigate, all the doors were closed, and it was as if nothing happened. Like just this phantom sound rushed through the house and just left. Just a ghostly hurricane, I guess. Then they heard a voice whisper, "Betsy, you should not have come over here. You know I can follow you anywhere. Now get a good night's sleep." Then the Bell Witch gently patted Betsy's cheek and told her she would not bother her again that night. So word of the happening in and around the Bell house spread, even as far as to then Major General Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was so intrigued, he decided to visit the Bell's house. He brought his horse, a large wagon, and a large group of men traveling with him. Well en route, the wagon just stopped. It seemed to be stuck in the mud. And after struggling with the horse and the mud, Jackson announced, "By the eternal, boys, this must be the Bell Witch." A female voice responded and told him that he may proceed, and that she would see him later that night. The wagon immediately became unstuck and proceeded. They arrived at the Bell house. Jackson and his posse set up camp outside. One of the men that Jackson had brought with him was a self-proclaimed witch tamer. He pulled out a pistol and boasted that it contained a silver bullet that would kill any evil entity that approached them, and that the Bell Witch dare not approach them out of fear. Instantaneously, the man just started getting jerked around as if he was taking a beating by an unseen entity. He started yelling out that he was being stuck with needles. The beating ended with an invisible kick right in his pants. An audibly upset Bell Witch announced that Jackson was traveling with another fraud and she would unveil him tomorrow. The men were all terrified and wanted to leave immediately. Andrew Jackson wanted to stay and identify the other fraud. Whether the fraud was identified or not, I could not find. But it's alleged that Andrew Jackson said that, quote, "I would rather fight the British in New Orleans than fight the Bell Witch." An odd thing that I saw about John Bell was that he was excommunicated from the Baptist Church. I've seen some articles imply that he may have been loaning money at extremely high interest rates and pissing people off. People began to wonder if he was so prosperous in North Carolina, what was the reason he decided to take a dangerous trip and move his family to Tennessee? The hatred the Bell Witch had for John did not stop being expressed, continuously vowing to kill him. John Bell had numerous seizures, and when he would come to, the Bell Witch would just start slapping him, and his shoes would just fly off his feet. This may have been because back then, I guess it was improper for a man not to have his shoes on, as in the Lizzie Borden case when Andrew Borden, already clearly deceased, before the crime scene photos were taken, his shoes were put back on to not photograph socked feet. So John Bell, for the past year, had developed a twitch in his face, and swallowing became difficult. In the fall of 1820, he was so sick that he was not even leaving his house. The witch would mock and curse old Jack Bell, as she called him, as a derogatory nickname. So on December 19th, 1820, John Bell slipped into a coma, and the next morning he was dead. That day, the family found a vial of black liquid unfamiliar to them in the kitchen. John Jr. decided to test it on the cat. He gave the cat 2 drops, and the cat died. The witch exclaimed, "I gave Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him." The vial of liquid was thrown into the fire, and it just enlarged into a big blue flame. So people came from miles away for John Bell's funeral. During the whole funeral, the witch was laughing and singing drinking songs until the last person left the cemetery. So the witch's visit seemed to halt after she fulfilled her purpose. The Bells appeared to finally be free. Life could go on. In the upcoming years, Betsy was being courted by a neighbor named Joshua Gardner. He eventually proposed, she accepted, both families blessed the engagement. But one person, or entity, was not happy. Betsy was told not to marry Joshua multiple times by the witch. There was another man who also had his sights set on Betsy. Professor Richard Powell, her old school teacher. He made it clear while she was in school that he wanted to marry her when she was older. Gross. The teacher was disappointed about the engagement, but he wished her well. The engaged couple was nagged everywhere they went. The caves, the fields, the river. There was the witch. In 1821, Betsy had enough and ended the engagement. It became too stressful for her. Shortly after the engagement ended, the widow, Lucy Bell, was visited by the witch, who said, "I'm leaving you, but I'll be back in 7 years." So as promised, the Bell Witch did return for 3 weeks and just talked to John Bell Jr. She talked about an array of subjects, predicting the Civil War, the origin of life, and many more topics. So after the 3 weeks, she just disappeared again. The witch promised to return in 107 years. In 1935, some say she did return, some say she did not, and some say she never left. Betsy did end up marrying her old school teacher. Gross. And her family stated she was always nervous for the rest of her life, even into her old age. She refused to sleep alone, always having a grandchild or other family member sleep in the bed with her for fear that the Bell Witch would return. So in 2018, there was an interview with Bob Bell, the 5th great-grandson of John Bell, who still lives in Tennessee. He recalled a day that his grandmother called him in a panic. When he arrived, the shelves, some over 8 feet off the ground, where she stored her fine china, was empty, and all the china was strewn all over the floor, but not one piece was broken. Bob also recounts hearing heavy footsteps in the night, along with other strange activity. While at his grandmother's house, he happened upon a Bible in the basement from the year 1820, which was the last year that the Bell Witch was tormenting the family. Once the Bible was removed from the home, the activity stopped. There have been many books and movies based on the accounts of the family, including The American Haunting, which is where I learned of the story. Every fall in Tennessee, there's a play put on. Tons of people flock to see it. In 2012, 1,600 people came to see it. And what's cool is the play is done different every year, like from a different perspective. One year it would be from Lucy's or one year from Betsy's. Just sounds like a good time. Richard, one of John Bell's children, kept a diary from a young age. From 6 years old and on, he documented all the happenings. He did end up publishing the book, but he would not publish it until after Betsy's death. It's called Our Family Trouble, the story of the Bell Witch of Tennessee. It offers eyewitness accounts of the events. A lot of people are skeptical, especially because it seems that John Bell had made quite a few enemies during his lifetime. During the time he died, arsenic poisoning was becoming more frequent in Europe and in the United States. So much so that new laws had to be passed, and specific punishments had to be made for those doing this. A lot of enslaved people were poisoning their captors. And John Bell's symptoms, like face twitching or trouble swallowing, today we know this as a sign of arsenic poisoning. And if arsenic was thrown into a flame, it would turn blue, as the black liquid in the vial had. But if this was the case, it still doesn't explain who was taunting the family, talking everywhere, showing up everywhere, or the dog creatures. Some have theorized Catherine Batts or Kate, but it was a spirit, but Catherine was still alive. I saw in one place that an indigenous person's grave was disturbed, but I couldn't find much more on that. Others have speculated the creepy teacher that got Betsy. The Bell's house is torn down. But the cave, which was such a small piece in the story, is still visited by many enthusiasts who are intrigued by the story. A lot go trying to have some sort of paranormal experience or talk to the Bell Witch. It's such an interesting case. It's like a 1,000-year-old whodunit. But to end the story, this was the only person's death that was attributed to a spirit. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you need more content or just want to help support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and search Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you need some snazzy merch, you can find it at crowdmade.com by searching Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email it to ouchwasthataghost@yahoo.com. You can also find us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms under Ouch, Was That a Ghost?
Help me.
All links can also be found on ouchwasthataghost.com.